Hey everybody, welcome to this edition of Bird Brain 66 with your hosts out there, my good buddy, my good pal, Andy Teague. Andy, how are you?
Good, Brian. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you very much. We are going to be reviewing a fun collection from 1980, the 1980 Top Set, which takes us back to when we were really in the throes of collecting when we were much younger. The 1980 set has 726 cards in it overall. There are 31 Cardinal cards if you include, which Andy and I do, stuff like this, the leader cards with Keith Hernandez and Fred Lynn, as well as some of the highlight cards. Here's a great one of both Yaz and Brock's last cards, as well as we'll talk about him a little bit later on, Gary Templeton, with his unbelievable feat for the first time in Major League history with 100 hits from both sides of the plate. Andy, I'll turn it over to you because I know you love different aspects of this set. So, what are some of your highlights?
Well, I think just the overall design and pretty much and for the 80s, just let it off because the 80s actually had a good number of sets in it that had great designs to it, like the little banner at the bottom with the Cardinals on it. Um, I'll just pull up Ken Obergefell, for example. Very nice looking card. This is actually Ken's rookie card. He was not one of the future prospect cards, unfortunately, from the year before. So he ended up in the 1980 set, great third baseman for the Cardinals for a number of years. Some cool backs also. You always have a little cartoon there and a little bit of information on the back of the card. So it's always great when you can flip through the books and read all these cards on the back and see what the little cartoons represent each year. It's something a little bit different. Um,
I wanted to point out, I didn't mean to jump in real quickly, but I wanted to point out that you were right that it is for sure Obi's rookie card. We went and looked at the 1979 set before we started recording, and Ken is not in that collection, or is he in the Future Stars card with the three players? It was George Frazier, Tom Bruno, and Terry Kennedy were the three guys that were the prospects in '79. So good call on your part. It was Obi's rookie card. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. What are some of your other
Oh,
favorites in
that's
it?
all good. Well, I always like the team card when yeah, I always wish there's a team card every year, but sometimes that just didn't happen. As you can see, you got the all-time great Cardinal third baseman Ken Boyer as the manager, one of four managers in 1980. People don't know that, as many think that Whitey was the manager in 1980. He was for just a short period of time, along with Red Shandy's, Ken Boyer, and there's one other gentleman I can't. I'm losing his name off.
Vern.
No,
Was it Vern Rapp or was it Jack Kroll?
Kroll. It was Kroll. There you go. His name was escaping me, but those were the four managers, and they had two general managers that year with Whitey replacing John Claiborne. So just wanted to point that out as a little bit of trivia for Cardinal fans. So even though Whitey took over, so to speak, as the general manager, not necessarily the manager really until 1981. And with the checklist on the back of the team cards, also, most of the time people will mark these back in the day, but we fortunately didn't mark ours, but a lot of people did. If you had a double of it, you marked it up.
Well, I was just going to say thank you. That was a great observation on your part. That was the best part about collecting cards is you wanted to have duplicates of all the team cards because yes, I did have one that had a blank back, and then yes, I did have one that I used as my checklist that was kept off to the side. So great, great observation because I certainly
Well,
did.
the problem back then is you didn't have internet and unless you could afford to buy the little mini checklist book every year to update the current year, you're pretty much screwed. So you had to rely upon the checklist and then whatever you happen to put together. Or if you knew there's 792, what you said 792 that year, you had to make sure you had all 792 within the set because back in
Yeah.
the day, both you and I both collected the entire set. So it was a arduous task to say the least to collect 792 cards out of those boxes.
Right. So just a tangent going off for just a second about this set. So the savior for us collecting in the 80s was the big surf tops book. Remember that? So
Yeah.
this laundry detergent surf had a partnership with Tops. And so they produced all of the top base cards from 52, and it ran through, did it run through
85, I believe.
85? That's correct. Yeah. And so that's how really that was like the first quote unquote checklist for many collectors. I know for sure it was me. That's how I realized, especially during those 70s with all the crazy high number. There were times like, oh yeah, I've got the 71 team finished. Then you get the surf book and you're like, oh crap, I'm missing four other guys that were like 726 to, the end of that run. So that was, yes, so you're
Or
correct.
if,
So
or if you're lucky enough to get that little small checklist book that came out every year, so back in the day it was Tops and I think Fleer, back, in the 60s. There's only very few card sets actually represented in that little book. And sometimes I get it mixed up with my Looney Tunes flip book where you got the cartoon just for reference, those little cartoons and the flip them and then actually the animation would move
right.
and just for a little nostalgia there because those were always pretty cool when you were a kid.
Next
But
favorite one for you. Who you
what's
got
that?
next? Who's your next favorite one
Oh,
that we got handy?
well, since we're coming out of the 70s and the 80s, we had all kinds of cool things like Bernie Carbo, not necessarily a star for the team or anything, but the hairdo is the best. This reminds me of the Forsch Fleer card when Forsch had the perm. So, got the same type of hairstyle back in the day. So anytime you got an interesting hairdo or
Yes.
the human Zamboni right there, great third baseman, but nice stash, nice hair. You gotta love the look back in the day. Always
Hair
the
covering ears.
yep.
I
So that
love
was the
it.
only
Love
reason
it.
I picked those two particular ones out. So
Well, you know what? You go ahead. I'd be remiss if we didn't
unfortunately,
show.
and I'm going to show Clue Hayward because from Major League, everybody, if you have seen that movie, here he is right here, Pete Vukovich. And unfortunately, he didn't have the Clue Hayward look in this card, which would have been really cool if he had. But he's sporting a nice stash and hair in this photo as well. And he also led the team in wins that year with 12. So I know the 23 season has been a little bit disappointing. So we don't even have I don't think we'll have a 12 game winner this year, but we had one back in 1980. So just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, insult to injury. No, I was bringing this guy up because a little bit later on we featured him as a random Cardinal card of the day with probably having the best perm slash afro. I think it was his 1981. It's either Tops or maybe it's Flair. I can't remember where it's just an amazing flow
Right.
of hair, but like that. So lots of this is a transition period, but I got to show this one because I've always loved the multiple player cards. So look at those names on there. Obviously, in the middle is Tommy Hurd. George Frazier appears for the second year in a row on here, and just a fun one. Dan O'Brien. Don't know whatever happened with his career. If he ever bounced anywhere, if he was a career minor leaguer or whatever. But
I had a Dan O'Brien reference, but I can't do it right now. But it's a great reference, but I have to let that go for right now.
very nice.
So you showed one of these highlight cards earlier, and it was Gary Templeton. So the year prior, 1979, the Cardinals actually had set the record for Silver Slugger awards, and Templeton was one of them. Simmons, Hernandez, Forsch, and I think there might have been one more. But I just thought I'd point that out. Did I miss anybody? I did not miss anybody. But and obviously Keith won the Gold Glove the year prior as well. So
Oh, and well, 79 was he was the MVP, right?
yeah,
With
yeah, he was the
with
MVP. Was Willie
Tom
Stargell,
Stargell. Yeah.
which I found interesting because they didn't have a card that represented that in the set. That's kind of why I brought the awards up. They brought all that up except for the co-MVPs. So I thought that was interesting that Topps didn't throw out a card for that.
Yeah, and I can't remember if you have it or not in your collection. We've talked about it for a long time. There is a card of Hernandez and Stargell together. I think it was 7-Eleven and Coca-Cola. I
Yep.
got to go back and look where they're both on
You
the
are
same
correct.
card. So kind of cool, but yeah, very very puzzling that Topps didn't do it, and even more puzzling, with all the new stuff they're doing and all the retro looks and all the stuff that they're doing in Heritage. Hint, hint. Can you not, you know, do a tribute to the MVPs and at least give those two guys their just due on a card? It's our favorite word lately is maddening, and that one is just blows me away that that's not something that they've ever pursued, or why in 1980 they didn't pursue doing a card like that. So crazy, crazy. Well, we gotta show the greatest heavyweight boxer in of all time.
Mike Tyson, there he is.
Yeah,
He was a heavyweight champ. He was a second baseman for the Cardinals. So there he is, folks. Not
yeah.
really, just the name only. And we had Silent George, obviously led the team in home runs that year with 25. So imagine that 25 home run. I mean, back in the day in the expansive Busch Stadium, that's a pretty tall task, So
Right.
plus, boy,
George was a great George was a great power hitter, and and when Herzog was putting the team together, you can honestly say that the outfield was pretty much built around George Hendrick, because I mean, when Whitey was the GM, I mean, he wheeled and dealed and moved all sorts of players, and getting rid of Templeton for Ozzie, and really believed in Tommy Herr, and got rid of Vukovic, who you mentioned. I mean, the list goes.
and this cat too, Simba. I mean, the Hall of Famer. He even moves. This guy could hit like nobody's business. But again, it worked out. Got Daryl Porter and won the World Series. In '82. So Whitey obviously knew what he was doing, as he did throughout the '80s. So
One of my favorite cards of him too, by the way.
yeah, great, great. I liked it, and I like that little black banner up at the top too. Mentioning that he's an all-star too. So very nice job with Topps on that this
A
year.
quick story. So I've heard Whitey tell this story before, and I've actually heard Ted Simmons the last time I heard him speak about a year and a half ago at Busch Stadium. So, obviously Ted was upset by the trade. Lifelong Cardinal, was thinking that he was gonna, be the Cardinal catcher forever, retire as a Cardinal, blah blah blah. We know that he got traded. Well, and so the story came up. He was asked, and it was by Dan McLaughlin, were you bitter about the trade? And he said, it's part of the business. He was very diplomatic about his answer, but he also, believe it or not, credits Whitey Herzog for getting him back into baseball, in his role, to where he eventually, goes to the Pirates organization and has some tremendous, front office success. I can't remember if Ted was the president of baseball operations, or the GM, or the GM and then president. Anyway, he had an important role with the Pirates for several years, and Ted credits Whitey Herzog, because he actually, after his career was over with, Simmons reached out to Whitey and said, I'd like to get into baseball, and Whitey said, I think you're a pretty good assessor of talent, blah blah blah, and so it was because of Whitey that really helped pave the way for some of Ted's success, as a baseball executive. So I don't know if a lot of people know that or not, but again, I've heard both Whitey and Ted tell that story. I might have president of operations or GM, one of those might be a little bit off, but definitely he was definitely an executive with the Pirates for sure.
I'll throw one more up, Mr. Bob Forrest. Nice photo of Bob in there. Nice little action shot. Great Cardinal. what's he, the number three, number four in wins in the organization? Number three, I believe. No, four. I'm sorry, number four. Right behind Wayno right now. So there he is, Mr. Force in all his glory. The man with two no-hitters in Cardinal history.
Yep. Amazing that he's the only one,
It really is. It truly is. Surprised
considering
two or
Gibson and Dean and some of the other guys. It's just really crazy. I'll show one more just because this guy was always managed to for whatever reasons always liked this guy. More known as a pinch hitter than anything
yeah,
else. Really listening to baseball games. So I think your dad probably took you to more baseball games than my dad did, and it wasn't because my dad didn't like sports. He was more of a football Cardinal
right.
and had season tickets. But I can always remember listening to like sports on a Sunday morning with Jay Randolph and Ron Jacober and some of the guys. Even the late Dan Kelly would be on there, and it always seemed like every week there was some sort of Roger Freed highlight with some key, pinch hit, whether it drove in a run or moved over a run or so for whatever reasons back in the day. I just always remember the name Roger Freed and was always, one of those unsung guys that I really, really liked a lot growing up.
Yeah. So it would be terribly discredited if I didn't have a Van Halen reference for 1980. So I do. Women and Children First came out the 1980. So great album. Of course, when we were that young, we thought they were all great albums and really enjoyed it. But I'm gonna have to also mention AC/DC because that's the same year that Back in Black came out. So if you want to talk about a really iconic album that's really stood the test of time, Back in Black is the that's really go to album, CD, whatever, digital down, whatever, or workouts, whatever it happens to be, just good old fashioned rock and roll. So wanted to mention that. And also want to give a shout out to a sports movie that came out that year, Caddyshack. So there you go. A few sports references and music references there for you.
Right, very good. Well, I definitely remember the Women and Children First with Everybody Wants Some as a really, really super long song, and the Cradle Rocks being on that. And then of course there was always a great Eddie guitar solo. Tora Tora was on there. So just lots of good music. Unfortunately, on that album, I think there were a couple of more cover songs as they really wanted to write more music, but their record label wanted them to get albums out faster to get them back on tour. So I know that was a little bit in hearing stories from those guys that they weren't always the biggest fans of doing all the covers, but the best part about that between David Lee's improvising with the lyrics and the screams, and Eddie's masterful playing of the guitar, and Michael Anthony screaming in the background, being a great backup lyricist, and Alex on the drums. So great memories with Back in Black, and great memories with Bill Murray chasing after the gopher and all the other
That is
stuff in Canada.
correct. Great movie. Especially if the younger generation hasn't seen that, you got to check that movie out. May not hold up the test of time, but still funny.
Yeah, and there's not somebody in within our age group that can't regurgitate, repeat, whatever you want to say, many of the classic lines in that movie, from "It's in the Hole" to "It's a Cinderella Story" to just I mean, on and on and on. Just I love it. Rodney Dangerfield's great. Ted Knight's great. Chevy Chase is great. Bill Murray's great. Brian Doyle Murray's great. I mean, just on and on and on and on. So, with that, we appreciate you guys joining us for this show. Love the 1980s set. We'll be doing more reviews. You can always catch our reviews on YouTube. We're still working out some bugs on some other things because we both have real jobs, but trying to get our brand and some of our our talks out there and on other platforms. But for right now, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and we're on Twitter, which is now the big X or whatever the
X.
heck it is. So appreciate you joining us for the 1980 Tops review, and we'll come back with more music references on our next show as well.
Right.
So tell everybody thanks, and Andy, I'll turn it over to you to say goodbye.
Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate it. And check us out again and keep stay tuned. More to come.